Hey guys, want to do a quick study guide review with you. I know not everyone will probably be in class on Thursday when we do this, so I'm going to go over it with you right now. Just to make sure we understand, this covers chapters 26 through 29 of our History Alive text, plus all the notes and activities associated with that from class, covering pages 329 to 379 in your textbook. Okay. Just a quick recap. I'm going to go pretty fast, so make sure you stop, pause as we go through this. The study guide is on here, and so if you don't have the study guide, it is on Edmodo. That way you can print it off if you need to. All right, basic historical context of communism. We've talked about that before. It's from the writings and works of Karl Marx. It was something that was going to be a revolution of the working class in which there's public ownership of all goods. Something that really existed mostly in Russia and then some parts of Asia, really not around much today, but this is when you start to see a big push for communism. We have the Red Scare, which kind of ties into the whole subversives. If you remember, we talked about a guy named Palmer, who's a government official in the Palmer raids. The Palmer raids were when Mr. Palmer himself and other agents would go and try to round up subversives or anyone they considered to be a threat to the United States. A threat to anyone who would violate democracy, for example. There was the Red Scare. Those were subversive, those that were in potential opposition to the United States. So those were suspected communists. Again, communism being the idea that we have public ownership, everyone works together, based on the writings of Karl Marx. Quota system, that's about the immigration and how we had an immigration system that tried to limit who and how much of particular groups come in. If you remember, we looked at the early 1900s, how we have a big immigration boom, but then things start to fall. And part of the reason it started to fall is, yes, we have World War I, but after World War I, things go way up. But then it's almost as if the government says we have too many people, we need to limit how many we let in. So we set a quota system, limiting certain groups of people from coming in. Now, those groups of people we limit coming in are specifically those from what could be considered communist areas. Okay, again, trying to prevent certain ethnic groups from coming because they might bring communist ideas with them. So we have the Anti-Defamation League next. Anti-Defamation League, the purpose they had was to really protect people's civil rights, make sure that people were treated fairly and that all groups were treated fairly. Anti-Defamation League would have come to the defense of like Sacco and Vanzetti. If you remember Sacco and Vanzetti, the two guys that were accused of murder, really mostly because of their Italian heritage. So Anti-Defamation League would be an organization that would come to their aid to make sure they were treated fairly and that they got a fair opportunity, fair shake in the government. Okay, so moving on, your study guide, purpose of strikes in the 20s and how a union works. If you remember, an organization or a group of people will strike if their needs are not being met by the company. Okay, so for example, you work at Hostess and you do not feel like you are making enough money, that your job benefits are high enough quality, so you and the other people in the union are going to band together and say, hey, Hostess, we will not work until you pay us X amount of dollars. Now, with that in mind, a company doesn't have to meet your needs. They could just fire you. They could decide they don't want to meet what you want. And because of that, you might lose your job. And so one of the things we do see is during the 1920s, we see the amount of unions start to shrink because they weren't being protected by the government. And so, yes, there was a lot of strikes, but at the same time, we start seeing a reduced wages for union members because businesses could do that. The government wasn't regulating whether or not a business could reduce union members' wages, and therefore we have a lot of strikes happening, but at the same time they weren't as effective as it could have been because there was no government protecting the unions. There's no government making sure they were being protected. So the government's kind of let businesses do what they wanted to do and really let them have control over how their company is run. So then we look down there, Warren G. Harding's presidency. Warren G. Harding really reduced your federal spending. Warren G. Harding was one of the first guys to open up the White House to the public, try to make his presidency very well known, but also along with it, if you remember, Warren G. Harding had the Ohio Gang, some of his friends, some of those in his inner circle that were involved in some scandal in which they made money off of oil leases, government oil leases. Remember that? And so he ended up, having a presidency that people looked at as kind of disgraceful because of those within it took advantage of the position they had. So moving on then to your Dawes Plan. Your Dawes Plan was a plan in which the United States had to help solve foreign debt, trying to make it so the countries who was paying who and who was getting paid kind of got moved around. So the Dawes Plan was the United States plan to help work with our war debt. Keller-Brand Pact, this is another thing that kind of dealt post-World War I, much like the Dawes Plan. But the Keller-Brand Pact was designed to reduce or prevent future war from occurring. So that was their goal, of saying, hey, if you agree to this, you're not going to go to war. And you agree that war is not an acceptable method or mode of dealing with your problems. If you have an issue, we're going to deal with it diplomatically, not with war. And as you guys know, this really doesn't really work out because we're just a few years away from hitting World War II. Okay. Next thing on there, caused the economic boom of the 1920s. What led to that economic boom? In many ways, what leads to it is not only the policies of the government and allowing business to grow, but because a business could grow, we have a massive amount of new industry, new technologies, and so when there's new things, new industries, people are buying stuff. People are going out purchasing new and more inventions and creations are made. And a lot of that was a direct result of the government kind of backing off and saying, hey, you do your thing and we'll let you be. So then the country really booms because of all the new industry that's there. Basics of a free enterprise system. Free enterprise system is the idea that people own their own businesses. The government is not involved. Free enterprise says a person, private individuals, private companies are able to control their businesses as they see fit. All right. So we move into some of the issues that were going on with equality. We look specifically at the purpose of the League of Women Voters. The League of Women Voters, main thing they're trying to work with is to educate people on the issues, to educate America on what was really going on and try to make sure everybody knows and is informed when they make choices and decisions. They also worked to allow women to get the vote. Of course, we know that happens in 1919, 1920, when women do get the right to vote. The League of Women Voters, they're really working to give everyone equal access to information, make sure people are knowledgeable and know what's going on. What leads to the development of national popular culture in the 1920s? So if you remember about like consumerism, 1920s is when people really start buying stuff. And a lot of that is we now have mass media in many ways. What is that mass media method? Newspapers are on the rise, magazines are on the rise, radio becomes huge. And so because of things like the radio, now everybody's hearing different advertisements for businesses, for products, for whatever it is we think we need. People start hearing it. Much like advertisements today are targeted at people to get them to buy stuff, it all starts with the radio and people thinking, oh, I better go buy this, I better go buy that. The other thing that occurs is people are able to buy on installment plans or buy on credit. Yes, I don't have the cash today, but I'll have it tomorrow, so let me go ahead and buy this with credit, i.e. a credit card comes eventually. Let me buy it with credit, promising that I will pay it off later. Problem is, this puts a lot of people in debts. They think they'll have the money, but in reality they don't or never will have the money. And so people go bankrupt. Big problems happen with this. History of jazz and its key contributors. So remember, jazz was at first an African American music style that came up from the South to some of your cities. Detroit moves into like New York City and some of those urban areas, in which we have guys like Duke Ellington, Louis Armstrong. They become real popular with jazz music, a whole different style of music, and that leads in a lot of ways into your Harlem Renaissance. Remember your Harlem Renaissance? Harlem Renaissance is when you have African Americans that are really starting to come into their own. They have a place that they have less, should we say, mistreatment, so they're able to expand their creativity, and the world in so many ways is finally able to see how amazing African American people are. And so instead of being discriminated against, they're now able to actually express themselves, whether it's through art, poetry, music, dancing, all these things that the African Americans really had excelled at. Now others are starting to see through the Harlem Renaissance out of New York City. So your condition of American farmers in the 1920s. If you remember, after World War I mean, you think before World War I, during World War I, the American farmers are putting massive amount of product to the soldiers. Well, as soon as the soldiers are done, they don't need the food anymore. All these farmers have a huge surplus of material, surplus of goods, and so no one's able to buy it. And so you have farmers that are going into debt, farmers that the product's not needed anymore, and so the crop prices fall. A lot of farmers go into bankruptcy. So, difference between rural traditionists and modern urbanists. We just got done talking about this actually today as I'm recording this. Maybe rural traditionists want to keep more traditional values. Urban modernists want to progress things. So you look at something like prohibition. Okay, your traditionalists were in favor of it. They thought that alcohol was the ultimate evil, and which is going to lead to people making poor choices, going to lead to violence, going to lead to inappropriate behavior. Whereas your modern urbanists think, no, it's our choice. We should have the right to do what we want, think, say what we want. And so you look about the difference in the two. Your rural traditionists, remember, those are the people that are a little more in the country. Urban, those are your city people. And so we have big differences between the way they view what is considered acceptable for day-to-day life. Next one on there, your Scopes trial. Remember, this was the trial. John Scopes, he was a science teacher in Tennessee, and they were discussing whether or not it is okay to teach evolution in the school. Remember from the information, John Scopes, the teacher, he ends up being arrested because he did violate a state law in teaching evolution. So that's the start of people discussing and debating whether or not you should teach creationism or you should teach evolution in the public schools. Last one, problems with prohibition. Traditionalists versus modernists, viewpoints on prohibition. All right, so talked already about that a little bit. Think about your traditionalists really thought prohibition is going to prevent violence in the homes. It's going to prevent drunkenness. It's going to keep people in their jobs because they're not going to be out late drinking. Whereas a modernist says, hey, we should be able to consume and do what we want to do. All right. Your last few people down here, Jim Thorpe, one of the great American athletes, known as the greatest athlete of the century. Amelia Earhart, pilot, flew around across the oceans. Bessie Smith, famous African-American musician of the era. F. Scott Fitzgerald, the man that wrote Great Gatsby. Henry Ford, you guys know Henry Ford as one of the main contributors to vehicle production and mass production of. Next one here being Bruce Barton. He was one of your guys that contributed to the consumer culture, big into advertising, big into media, getting people involved in newspapers, magazines. And the last one being Gertrude Eldery. She was a great female athlete and really one of the first women to push what was accepted and known as okay for a female to do, a long-distance swimmer. Really an impressive woman for her day, excuse me. So that's a quick roundup going through your study guide. Again, this covers chapters 26 to 29. Good luck. Look forward to you guys taking that test on Friday. It'll be all multiple choice. There's going to be some graphs and charts in there, so take your time to review. Have an awesome day. Bye.